Hello, everyone. This is Geraldine Jerry Burton with the Community Technical Assistance Center, CTAC. We welcome you to our webinar today. Upon joining the webinar, you have been placed on mute to avoid any background noise that may distract others from listening to the presentation. If you come across any technical issues during today's webinar, please chat to the hosts who will be able to assist you. You will have the opportunity to participate early in the presentation using the chat box feature, which is located on the bottom right side of your screen. We ask as you are signing in to chat with us your name, agency, and your role. When the question appears on the screen, you can participate by typing in your response. If you do not see the chat box, click on the speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your responses to everyone. The slides, recording, and resources will be posted on the CTAC website at www.ctacny.org. Additionally, there will be time for a Q&A portion at the end. We also ask that you complete the feedback survey following the webinar. Our webinar today, Partnering with Families to Enhance the Family-Driven Practice. Partnering with families to enhance family-driven practice. This webinar will provide a brief overview of family-driven care and focus on the relationship between an individual provider and a parent caregiver with whom they are working. You can become more family-driven in your work by applying the principles of FDC in your direct practice. Two specific resources will be discussed. One, the caregiver perspective, which is a brief tool to obtain feedback. Two, tips for caregivers, a flyer that outlines different ways parents can partner with providers. So, who's with us today? Please fill out the poll question and type in and click on which one you are, family peer advocate, youth peer advocate, clinicians, supervisors, or others. And we'll take a few minutes and allow you to do that, and then we'll see our recorded answers. All right, so we have family peer advocates, we have 19, 6 youth peer advocates, 10 clinicians, 12 supervisors, 21 others, and 26 no answers. Thank you everyone for your participation. Next, we want to have a chat. Please type into the chat box, what does family-driven care mean to you? So we have a few answers. Families taking the lead in decision making, meeting families where they are, and building skills from there. The family has input and guide the services. A service that is focused on empowering the family to succeed. Families are driving the bus and able to invite others. Collaboration for joint goals and interventions. Giving the family a voice and choice. They're coming back so fast I can hardly read them. Anyway, so you get the picture. Thank you. Meeting families where they are. All right. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Keep submitting. Now I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Thanks, Jill. You want to pass me over the slides? Okay, great, thanks. So my part of this webinar is really to talk about what actually is family-driven care. So we come at it, we have a lot of different people here, and we all come at it from slightly different perspectives. So we thought it would be a good idea to, talk about how we see family-driven care and what family-driven care is to us. So I'm going to start by giving kind of a semi-formal definition of family-driven care. And this definition is from the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, which is a national family-run organization. So for those of you who've been involved in systems of care initiatives, this should look very familiar. In summary, it says that parents should be in the driver's seat when it comes to decisions about the care their family receives, and also at a program and policy level, to have a meaningful voice in decisions at the agency, state, and national level. So a lot of you were talking about, putting families in the driver's seat, but, we're going to add a little more to that. This is important not only because it's, we feel like it's the right thing to do, but because it has a huge impact on families' engagement in the services that you provide. You don't need to think farther than how you might feel navigating services if decisions were being made for you to grasp that family-driven care is foundational for trust and engagement. Family-driven care is a set of principles that lead to specific practices to support a collaborative partnership between parents, caregivers, and their providers, in which we ensure that families have a primary decision-making role. We'll be focusing a bit more on these principles later on in the webinar. Often when asked if agencies are family-driven, organizations kind of instinctively say yes, because that's really where they want to be and where they want to go. But when we kind of look at this slide, you can see that family-driven is more of a continuum. Being family-friendly is a good first step to family-driven care. It supports creating an environment where families might feel more comfortable walking in and receiving services. But it doesn't involve families in identifying what changes might occur to make this possible. Some examples of a family-friendly approach might be a waiting room that has toys for children, changing tables in the bathroom, and practitioners and staff are warm and make families feel really welcome. But if you take that a step further, you get to this concept or this idea of family involvement. So family involvement moves organizations closer to family-driven care. Practitioners will include families as a resource and actively involve them in the treatment of their child. And family members are invited to meetings. Events are planned for families to keep them engaged, and families are asked for their input. But being family friendly or involving families more are, steps on the road to getting to the idea of family-driven care. When organizations are truly family-driven, the family is in the driver's seat when it comes to any decisions that are made about them. It also means that family voice, priorities, and preferences are valued throughout the entire organization. Families are involved in, are perhaps voting members of the board of directors. They would be reviewing outcome data, interviewing prospective staff, and co-leading staff training. And that's just a few ways that agencies can become family-driven. We think about family-driven as care as something to continually be working and striving for. There's always something that can be done or room for improving family-driven policies and practices. So, you can move along this continuum and, get to family-driven care, or and then there's always something that you can tweak to move you closer to this ideal. So why is family-driven care important? Oh, slide didn't change. Sorry, there it is. Okay, so why is family-driven care important? I think that's a good question to ask, right? We touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to expand on it. From my perspective, I'm a parent. Family-driven care was key, I think, to my child's success in all of the treatment settings that he was in. But when family-driven care approaches aren't used, and my voice wasn't heard or respected, I found that my son ultimately was the one who suffered. Often as his mother, I was able to recognize the signs that things weren't going so well. And there were cycles and times of year that were triggers for my son, and I knew about them. So I would go to the providers and I would share my experience, and I kind of had a list of simple interventions that usually worked for him. So I would share those. But most every time in the beginning anyway, my suggestions were disregarded, and it was very frustrating. I felt like valuable treatment time was lost, and that could have been used to prevent something that would often become a full-fledged crisis. This not only affected my son, but it also affected my trust in the people that I was working with, and my belief that they would be able to partner with me to help my child. And after a few of these types of situations, I ended up feeling, as I think a lot of parents do in these situations, hopeless, powerless, and largely defeated. And I share this story with you today to kind of make a point. And that is that family-driven care is really at the heart of empowerment for families. It encourages parents and caregivers to participation by putting them in the driver's seat. When parents and caregivers are at the center of decisions made about their child's treatment, it enhances their trust in the practitioner and their engagement in the process. It helps to build, I think, and did for me, strong collaborative relationships that lead to more positive outcomes for the young people and their families. When families are seen as expert members of the team with strengths as well as needs, and are given the opportunity to share in the treatment ideas, their feelings and assessment of their child's progress, they're more empowered and more motivated, I think, to support their child in moving toward recovery. A true family-driven partnership between families and providers benefits everyone involved. So the family, of course, the provider, and the child. They're not always easy to focus on, but the actions and activities on this list are important ways that you can demonstrate family-driven care. Providers and parents and caregivers working together become efficient and effective problem solvers, and this leads to an assumption of shared responsibility. When you recognize the value of what families bring to the table, they'll be more accepting of your expertise and suggestions that you make. As partners, you and the parent can share a sense of accomplishment when goals are reached. And I think that's something that we don't think about often, but I think, sharing those things is a particularly strong way to demonstrate this idea of family-driven care or family-driven practice. By putting families in the driver's seat, the care you provide will be more relevant and more focused on each family's unique priorities. One of the biggest barriers to engagement is stigma and the feeling by parents that they're being judged. Families will feel supported, empowered, and trusted when trusted to make decisions, and that's sending an important message that you value them. So, thinking about ways to help families feel supported and empowered, I think is a big piece of this. By working in this way, parents and caregivers develop the knowledge and information that they need, skills, the ability to use their voice, and the confidence and resources that they need to advocate for their child and their family moving forward. So now we're going to do kind of a little scenario, right? So we have this brief scenario we'd like you to participate in, and I'm going to read the scenario, and then we're going to give you a poll to answer, and then we're going to chat in. So in the poll, we're going to ask who's driving in the scenario, and for the chat, we want to know how you would correct the situation. So a family has been referred to you for services. The agency making the referral shared with you that the family has a lot of issues and really doesn't want help, but they agreed to talk to you anyway. So here's the poll just came up. So if you can just pick the person who is driving in this scenario, we'll be able to see what everybody thinks. So the choices are family, provider, referral agency, and unsure. So that's going to come up in a minute. It's amazing. It's always amazing to me how much information you can glean from a sentence or two. Okay, just another couple of seconds, and we'll be able to see what everybody thinks. And while, if you've already filled it out while you're waiting, you can kind of think about what you would do to correct the situation. And, you can, when the poll's over, you can chat that in, or probably you could chat it in right now. So, okay, here, the poll just came back. So, let's see, the family, there are 11% of the people said that the family was driving in the scenario. 3% said the provider. 43% said the referral agency, and there are a couple of people who said that they were unsure. I think this one is pretty tricky. I would say that in some ways it's the referral agency who is in the driver's seat, because they're the ones making the judgment and sharing that judgment with you, right? So they're kind of setting up how you might think about this situation. So thanks for participating in the poll, and let's move on to the chat. So what would you do to correct this situation? Let's see if we have some that would come in. Oh, wow, there are lots of people here. Let me see if I can get up to the top and read a couple of them. Talk to the family and discuss what they think, would be most helpful at this point. So referring back to the family and what they think is a good solution. I would talk to the family, same kind of thing. I would meet the family. I would meet the family and ask them what their feelings are, introducing yourself to the family and talking to them about what your relationship with them will be like. Give the family a voice, approach the family with an open mind. I think that's really important in this kind of situation. Since the family is willing to chat with me, I would invite them to come in and be a part of the planning. Meet the family and ask them what they think they need or what they think would help. I would meet the family and ask them what their what they think is going to be happening. What are their expectations? My thoughts are being expressed by others already answering. Okay, great. So I think we've covered a lot of it, and those are really great suggestions on ways to, fix this, which I think, often happens. Referral agencies do often have an opinion, which can be helpful or not, but going back to the family to talk about what their needs are and what their expectations are, I think is a good way to move more toward a family-driven approach. So we've talked about what family-driven care is and why it's important to infuse this into your service delivery. And I wanted to shine a light on some common misconceptions that may kind of raise concerns for people. So the first misconception is that family-driven practice reduces the focus on goals and outcomes. But in reality, families have goals and they want to make progress. The difference is if they have a voice in developing their goals, they may be more engaged in taking the steps necessary to get to these positive outcomes. Another misconception, family-driven practice means that families can demand what they want. And in reality, often it's just the opposite. When providers and families engage in shared decision-making, the need to demand things tends to go away because families feel heard and there's a shared understanding of what the family's priorities are. So they're not actually demanding, you're in a partnership with them, working with them toward goals that both of you agree on. Another misconception, family-driven practice takes more time or slows things down. But in reality, while there's an upfront investment in time, as you deepen your family-driven strategies into your everyday practice, the payoff is that families will generally make faster progress toward their goals, and because services are aligned with the family's priorities. And a couple more, family-driven practice means that families are responsible for implementing their own plan of care. And in reality, everyone on the team has different responsibilities, including the family, because families might not have been given a role before. Providers may need to support the family to take on a more active role in planning and implementing the plan. Another misconception, family-driven practice means that the professionals should keep their opinions to themselves. And in reality, I think professional opinions are really important. When practice is family-driven, professionals provide families with information that allows the family to make their own well-informed decision. It's important, however, to communicate these feelings and opinions in a positive and effective manner. So we want to help families to be able to communicate well about what they need, and to be able to understand and accept feedback from professionals and the professionals' opinions. And lastly, family-driven practice means that clinicians' help is less valued. And in reality, all types of expertise are needed and wanted. Parents are experts on their families, but the knowledge, skills, and strategies that providers bring is equally important. When care is provided in a family-driven way, the professionals and parents work as partners without one having more power than the other. So I'm going to pass this along to Anne, and she's going to continue.
Hello, everyone. I see some familiar faces and some new names of people who are attending, and I just want to welcome everyone and from all these different areas of expertise. I work at CTAC, and I have the pleasure of doing a great deal of work with both family and youth peer advocates, and that relates to family-driven care, but also really helping everyone continue to have a conversation about how they can deepen their family-driven practice. And what I love about these webinars, and I wish we could all actually talk to each other, is that I always learn something. And one of the comments that was just made when Susan was talking was that the person said they don't really see it that way, that the referring agency is in the driver's seat, because it was actually the family, despite their reservations, that chose to engage in services, and that shows initiative. And it just gave me a new way of thinking about it, because I actually checked off the referring agency because I was so annoyed that they were sending bad information over ahead of the family. But that's, I just feel like we can constantly challenge one another as sort of critical friends to deepen our practice of family-driven care. So I thank you for that comment, and for all the other comments that I saw as well. They really helped me think a little bit more about this. And we all talk about this all the time, but I think there's always something to learn. And to that end, I'm going to switch this question up a little bit and ask you to type into the chat box something specific that you've done at some point in your career to deepen your practice of family-driven care, something concrete, some change that you made in how you approach your work, how you think about your role, how your agency operates. What's some example? Send us some examples of things that you've done to, deepen that commitment to family-driven care. And we'll read a few of those off. Believing in the power of my own voice as a family member, so important. And we will talk a little bit about that. This requires two people, right, to be family driven, and the family member has to see themselves as part of that process and feel safe being part of that process. Bringing my own family experience to the table when acceptable. Yes, exactly. So we're talking about the power of lived experience there, and using that as a way to open people's minds, help them reframe maybe some assumptions that they're making about families. Really powerful. Using the FANS, the Family Assessment of Needs and Strengths tool, to, wow, I'm used to using Zoom and the comments fly by here in WebEx, sorry. Using the FANS to see what the family thinks is important. So for those of you who are not familiar, FANS is the Family Assessment of Needs and Strengths. It's a brief set of questions that family care advocates sometimes use, not so much as a sit down and answer questions, but as the basis for a conversation to really understand the family's perspective. Putting my feet in their shoes, I always discuss what's going right in the family and look for the good. Exactly. We start our intake process with strengths-based questionnaires to get to know participants' strengths right from the beginning. We then can go back to their answers and bring them up and use strengths throughout the process. It is interesting, it's tough to be family driven and to really engage the family member in this partnership if it's all about negativity. I know I'm not inclined to be a full partner if I feel like I'm not, my strengths aren't being respected. In designing our partnership, we intentionally require that referrals come only with family consent to be contacted. And we also ask that the referral agency only gives us contact information and not their version of the story. So I think all of us have had the experience of meeting a service provider for the first time. And, maybe it's just in our own lives seeking medical care or on behalf of a child who needs services, where you get there and there's a whole story that's already been told about you. And so you have the burden of correcting that. And also it starts to put you in a position where you feel like you're defensive. And I love that, you would, and Tina is saying this, their agency wouldn't even listen to that referral that gave them information that wasn't coming from the family. We now use a family service plan to guide where the family is as they come into the program, and then where we want to guide them, what resources we may want to share, and the curriculum to give out. Really exciting. That's great. And the family, I assume, is part of building that plan. Remember to ask families what's important to them and to their families. You may see a situation and you automatically think there are 3 priorities. They may be very different than the family's priorities. Be open to the family and share my experience when possible. Request interdisciplinary meetings for medically complex children when the parent seems confused or unsure of their child's plan, to empower them with knowledge and give them the ability to advocate. Good grief, this is so wonderful. There are so many ideas here. And I love that I see people coming from all different disciplines to this conversation, because this is a universal concept. All right, forgive me for those of them I didn't read out loud, but we'll keep moving. So this is a handout that will be posted when we post the slides, and it outlines some of the guiding principles of family-driven care, and also some, some sort of like a little bit more thinking about what that might mean to really dive into that particular principle. And you all are clearly, already thinking about these kinds of things. But this handout might be helpful to you as you do training and help others, even help family members think about what you mean when you say you want to be family driven. And we're going to go through some of these over the next few slides. So we wanted to share this note on trauma-informed care with you, because as we were planning this webinar, it sort of occurred to us how much the principles of family-driven care are consistent with the tenets of trauma-informed care. And I'm sure many of you have had training in trauma-informed care, but we just kind of wanted to call that out. When you think about trauma-informed care, you think about creating safety, increasing trust and a sense of transparency, peer support, how important peer support is in a trauma-informed framework, about mutuality and collaboration, and about making sure that you pay attention to family members' culture, their history and gender issues. So this is just sort of a footnote that by being family-driven, you are also really supporting trauma-informed practices. So one of those principles that you see in that list of principles is that families have accurate and complete information. You know yourself that if you have an important decision to make, you want to know, let's just use it, a child who might need, mental health services. You want to understand what's going to happen. How effective is this service, particular intervention that's going to be used? Is it effective for children like my child? Children experiencing the same challenges, children of the same gender, children from the same ethnic background? What information does that provider have about how that service is going to work? And also, what might my options be? Is that the only choice we have for getting assistance? So it's really, really important. And sometimes people skip this step because, you have this idea of what you're going to do. And families really need to be given the opportunity to get all of the information about their options and choices, including sometimes the answer, I don't know. which is an honest answer sometimes, and then they can make a decision going forward. Something that came up, and I was reading recently a survey that the Administration for Children's Services in New York City did, and they were asking families, what their experience had been like receiving services from ACS. And one of the things families asked for was more information on the interventions that were being used, and also like how long will it take? And I think that we can underestimate families' need to kind of get a sense for the what's this going to be like over the next few months. So I thought that was an interesting example of an organization giving families an opportunity to weigh in. They are developing some more family-facing information on the different interventions that are available, and also including some information on possible timeframes. So, engagement in services is all about building a relationship with the family. And to me, this is, it makes so much sense. Like, if the family feels that you are open to engaging in a conversation with them about what's happening, their experience of the care you're providing, if you're willing to say things like, oh, how did that work for you? And hear them say, not so great. And not, if a provider can come back at that point and say, okay, I'm really willing to work with you to try to figure out how we can work together in a more effective way, in a way that feels good to you. That's really an important part of all of this effort to become more family driven. So this is something else that you will have access to. It's called a quick reference guide. There are pages and pages and manuals and webinars on family driven care. And we're all busy, and sometimes we want to, get something in kind of a more quick format. So this is available to you. I really want to encourage you to actually sit down and share this with families, because as a couple of people said in the chat, families don't automatically enter into this partnership, partly because they have never been invited before. So they're skeptical. They're not really sure you want their input. They're not really sure you mean what you say when you say I'm family driven. So if you can help them understand what you mean and that you're serious about it, and that what their role can be, think of that as something that you need to do in a kind of deliberate and planful way. And this tool may be helpful to you as you have that conversation with families, and also as you talk to other providers. So, Susan talked a little bit about stigma, and I just really like the words of a colleague of ours, Cappy Madenwald, who talks a lot about how we have to believe that families are capable and competent. When they come having had a lot of tough things happen in their lives, they're not feeling capable and competent. Not all the time. Sometimes they're really feeling like people are judging them, that they don't believe them. And anything you can do to reduce that stigma that they're feeling by engaging with them and recognizing their expertise is really, really critical to forming a family-driven partnership with them. So these are just, I'm going to kind of gloss over this a little bit. I think we're going to talk later about tips for partnering with your child service provider. But just think about all the different ways in which you can signal to families that they are important as ways to reduce that stigma. And I think, no, this one is still me. I wasn't sure when I was turning over to my friend Janet. This is actually that tips for you to, this is something you can give to families about some tips for them to think about as they're working to partner with their service providers. And again, this is part of the teaching the family half of this partnership. We tried to write this in simple language. It's one page, and it is also available in Spanish. So those will be made available to you as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Janet Watson, to introduce herself. And from there.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Janet, as Ann said, Watson, and I am a part of the CTAC family. And so today I'm going to talk about the celebrate diversity, and honor each family culture. Each family culture, they are dimensions, and each family is unique. And also be aware of the biases and be alert to stereotype. All families are different, and that is what makes them unique. Building trust with the families are not judgmental. It shows that you are open and respectful from people different backgrounds other than your own. Show concern that you really care, want to build a strong relationship with the family and caregivers. This will help influence positive feedback with the family, feeling that they are important. This will lead families feeling that they are important, and feeling important can, can encourage families to open up more about their culture, and this will help you to learn more about them and to help you to serve them better. Because everyone wants to be important and feel that, you know, what they do and wherever their background, where they're from, they are important. And my next slide. So then we have some strategies to increase the FDC. Culturally, services, providers acknowledge and understand the cultural practices of the family in their internal and external. It can be helpful to collaboratively develop a visual representation of the family. Hence, with family starts with understanding that each family is unique, how they define themselves and relate to one another. It's helpful for our providers to acknowledge and understand the cultural practices of family and their internal and external environment and how that impact their relationships experience with services. Many cultural norms and practices may be different from those of the providers and the institution that the family encounters. So it's helpful to develop multicultural respects and understanding by labeling and discussing cultural differences. It can be helpful, collaborative to be visual representations of the family, to understand the dynamics, their relationships, the strength and challenges, as it also helpful to identify and address the concerns about their treatment regarding stigma, trust, and institutional support. So just keep, bear in mind that it's good to understand each family and their cultural and how you represent your representation to them. So I'm going to pass it over to Anne.
Hi, everyone. This is not Anne. This is Kara, but thank you,
that's
Janet,
right. This
and thank
is
you,
Kara.
everyone.
Sorry. Passing
No
over
worries.
to
No
Kara.
worries. Thank you for talking about that, Janet. And I'm Kara Dina Sale. I'm with this amazing team with CTAC, our family-driven care team with CTAC and Families Together in New York State. And I'm a social worker and have been for many years. So I'm going to go over a few more principles, guiding principles of family-driven care. But before we do, I really want you all to see these tools that we've developed over the past 2 years, because we're really proud of them. And we want them to be accessible to you so that you can use them with families beginning today or tomorrow or whenever it feels right for you. So Foon, would you be able to bring them up, or can I bring them up? Okay, can everybody see that?
Yep, you're good.
Great. So this is our let's start with the principles. So these are the guiding principles that we're going over today to really help you as a provider think about and actually be family driven in the care that you provide. And from your responses, actually, it sounds like many of you have a deep understanding of family driven care and are providing that to the families you work with. So this is something that you could share with colleagues, or it could just be a reminder. It's something you could hang up in front of you, or you could even give it to families as well. And then we have our tips for partnering with providers. And this is actually something we've developed, specifically Geraldine Burton and others, to hand out to families so that they know their rights. They know about sharing feedback. They understand that they're really experts in this relationship, and to really get the facts when they're participating in care. So this is available in English and Spanish. The principles as well are going to be translated into Spanish. They'll be done hopefully by the time we post all of this. We made a few changes that need to be translated. So, but this is going to be available, and as I mentioned here, it is in Spanish, so that you can actually hand this out to families. I'm sorry we don't have it translated into other languages. And then we have our quick reference guide. So what is family-driven care? Why is it important? What does it look like? And then just to think about, is your organization family-driven? But you can also think about that in regards to you as a provider. Again, this is also in Spanish. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the shared decision-making. So I need to go back to the slides if I can. Sorry about that. So I want to talk about the principle around shared decision-making and responsibility. So really that what this means is that we are presenting for families about opportunities to work together at all times, that they're part of their plan of care, that they're part of meetings, that they're part of any moment that a decision is made about a family, that they're a part of that, right? So I have worked with providers for a long time. I've also am a provider, and I know we can fall into this kind of thinking of like, well, what the family needs to do is A, B, and C, right? And I think it's really important, and I know you all probably agree with me that we're like, well, it doesn't actually matter what I think. It matters what the family thinks. What do they want for themselves? What do they want to start working on? Because if I want to, for example, help the family learn how to communicate better, but they may be worried about being evicted, that we may want to focus on attending to their rights, their human right, and their need for safety around helping them find housing and thinking about all the stress around that as opposed to them communicating better. That's just an example, but I'm sure you all could share some as well. And that you really play a vital role in helping the family shift from the passive role that they may actually be accustomed to a more active role. In fact, one of you chatted in around what family-driven care is. That family-driven care is the person or family-centered approach to service delivery for caregivers and youth. The decisions are made by the families and youth and supported by the family and youth advocates and others who work to support them. And I just thought that was a perfect definition and wanted to share it. So thank you for that. And that we utilize family feedback so that every time we're working with families, we're checking in about how's this going? How was today for you? Did we talk about what you wanted to talk about? Are we meeting those goals that we talked about? Do you want something different to happen? And so that's why we made this, that's family-driven care, caregiver perspective. I don't know if it's a little blurry for you, but again, we have this in Spanish, and it's pretty straightforward. It's 3 pages. And these are questions that you can ask you can go through this with the family that you work with at any time. Sometimes you could do it in the beginning of care, but if you're working with a family for a while, you can also use it with them. And so and encourage the family to be honest, because that's what's so important here, is that there's an open communication, open relationship, that there's a real bi-directional relationship between providers and families. And so here are some of those questions. Our provider asked me if they're helpful. I do that all the time. And I'm ready for somebody to say, no, actually, this wasn't helpful. I'm worried they may not do that. So, but the more comfortable we are asking that question, the more likely it is that one day when they don't feel like it's helpful, they'll be able to say that, right? When we first started working together, our provider described each of our roles, how we would work together, and the ways we would coordinate with other service providers working with my family. Incredibly important, right? So oftentimes, some of the families that we work with have really a lot of chaos in their lives and a lot of different appointments and a lot of different demands. And so helping to coordinate that with them and being a part of that with them can be incredibly helpful and healing in some way. Our provider gets back to me within 2 business days when I contact them. I'm sure you have your own, rules around that as in your organization, but that there is some responsiveness is incredibly important. and so forth. So you have this as well that's in Spanish that we really highly recommend that you use really to make sure that there's that shared decision making and responsibility. And so this is that. And that your practice from provider-driven to family-driven, as we've been talking about, so this is, just a little bit more. As you gain experience, you begin to see many opportunities to shift the practice. And so many of you may be reflecting on that in your own. I know for myself, when I first started as a social worker, I was working with teenagers in a residential treatment center, and I don't know that I was very family-driven. I was child-driven, and I was determined to figure out a permanent home for the kids that I worked with. But I don't know that I was always family driven. And so thinking about how you can change over time and that change doesn't happen all at once, right? That it does take time and that there are often micro changes that we can help families make that lead to those macro changes. And some of those strategies really involve commitment to family inclusion, that you can affirm the valuable and critical contribution of families and explicitly communicate their dedication to the incorporation of families so that family members have a voice and they feel included at all times. And their time is valued, they're given support, and et cetera. And then our last guiding principle is around families having access to peer support. I know that there are a lot of family peer advocates with us today, and I so appreciate all of your hard work. I've been trained by family peer advocates, for example, Janet Watson, Geraldine Burton, and Susan Berger on the line with us. Been working together for many years, and I've learned so much from them. And so we know how valuable peer support is, and it's really our job to make sure that families are connected to it. And as a reminder, these are the guiding values of family-driven care. And in family-driven care, families have the information they need to fully participate and make decisions, that they define who is part of their family and who they would like to engage in their care, that they have access to peer support, as I mentioned, and they have a strong voice in their own care. Family-driven providers really commit to making that shift from provider-driven to family-driven practices. Providers involve families and work to eliminate barriers, biases, and any kind of discrimination. Additionally, family-driven providers look to secure funding to sustain family-driven practices and service to ensure all families have access to high-quality care. And that, in essence, is why we're having this conversation. So next steps. So this is a chat-in that we'd love to have with you really briefly. Within the next 2 months, please chat in. So what kind of steps can you take to continue to deepen your practice of family-driven care? Let's start there. What steps can you take to continue to deepen your practice of family-driven care? Okay, Kathy says, provide the families with the handouts. Fantastic. And feel free to give us feedback on that, Kathy. We love feedback. And so, similar to, providers wanting feedback, we want feedback to see, was it helpful? Is there something different that we should do? Okay, so a lot of you are saying provide the handouts to families. Fantastic. Anything else? Are there conversations to have with families? Are there any little shifts? Be a better listener. Thank you, Karina, for that. Fantastic. Check in with families about their expectations or progress so far and continue to discuss their goals for their child. Great. All right, continue to check in. I know we're about running out of time, so feel free to chat in. Share the flyers with coworkers, so not only families, but with other coworkers. Love it. Possibly establish a parent advisory committee for our family support program. Fantastic. Prior to family meetings, reread the notes to train myself to think more family driven. Fantastic. Yes, these slides will be available, as will every single handout that we went over and that we've created. Be genuine and real. Ask what graduating from my services would look like to them. I love that, Christine. Yes. So what, when you're meeting with someone, what would it look like for you when we end services? Where would you be? What would you feel? How would your family be? That's a great stance. Understand family culture and practices, use humor. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. We just have a few minutes left for a Q&A. What kind of questions do you have? You have a whole team here to help you. So what kind of questions do you have around family-driven care? Any support that you need? Feel free to chat in. Any questions? What do you do when a family member doesn't engage? That's a question. That can be very challenging. Anybody on the team want to take that? What do you do when a family member doesn't engage? Or I could start. So I think asking the family how it's going for them. How is working with their child going? How is coming to see you going? How's it going? And just opening up that conversation is a really good start, as well as identifying some of the barriers that may be happening in their lives. So sometimes we don't always talk about those barriers. So that may be a place to start. Did somebody else have a thought on the team?
Yeah, I think those are good suggestions, Kara. I think, a variety of open-ended questions like that kind of allow the parent or caregiver to take the conversation where they want it to go, might lead to information about what the barriers are. Thinking about, is it stigma? Is it something that other people, might be in their life, might be thinking about, coming in for treatment? Is it something really concrete, like transportation is really challenging for them, or the time of day of the appointment? But, asking those kinds of questions, I think is a good way to give control of the conversation kind of back to the parent and get the information that you'd need to perhaps troubleshoot.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. We have another question. How can you encourage or convince other providers that your family sees to be more family driven? Excellent question. Anybody on the team want to take that?
Well, I think leading by example is a really good start. Showing or demonstrating in some way to other providers, the ways that you're family driven by doing it, and maybe being able to point it out, perhaps sharing some of the material that we're circulating as part of this webinar might be helpful as well.
I think if there's ever an opportunity for group meetings, it's also a time when you can really help the family prepare to participate, and then very deliberately create space for them to participate. And, that can happen if you're there at the meeting, but it can also happen through how you prepare the family before they go to see that provider the next time, to help them, think about how they want to participate. I've also had, I've definitely heard people go at the invitation of a family member, actually go with them and help that process happen outside of a formal team meeting. Like if they have a meeting with a particular provider and they're just having trouble expressing themselves, sometimes they'll go with them. So.
Fantastic. And in turn, we are running out of time, but just one final thought that I was thinking is that, bringing this up to your supervisor or in team meetings, as Ann was saying, bring up this webinar, bring up these handouts and these tools that we've created for others to use, could be incredibly helpful. So one thing before we leave, we have developed some CTAC resources that if you don't know about could be really helpful. So we have resources on family engagement on our LMS system. We also have resources on trauma-informed care. that could be really helpful. And then here are some additional resources. Again, the slides will be uploaded. And then we just have a few upcoming events that we wanted you to know about in the rest of February and in March. So thank you everyone for participating. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to the team. You all are so amazing, and we hope to see you another day. Hope you have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.